What if I told you that the MiG-21 is basically a melee build? You might be thinking, well, how the heck does that even make sense? But I promise you by the end of this video, it'll all make a little bit more sense. So, let's begin. This plane, like almost every other, has its pros and cons. In the case of the MiG-21, I still find it a little bit hard to love. However, one thing I most love about the MiG-21 besides its missiles, funny enough, which were the first things I hated, is the battle rating. I don't know if the snail was just on my side recently, but as I was trying to get gameplay for this video, I found myself at my battle rating. And the best thing about this battle rating is that hardly anyone ever climbs. And what that means is, if you get enough altitude difference and you're able to get behind an enemy and use your R60Ms, you're gonna have a good time. And the recipe that is having fun with the MiG-21, altitude is your main ingredient. With the MiG-21, I find the most success at just hovering right at 5,000 meters. Or depending on some maps, just a little bit below that contrail level. The main reason I don't like to go too high with the MiG-21 is because, well, its missiles can suck. I really don't bother with any of the other missiles besides the R60s. Two reasons. The first one being that the radar in the MiG-21 is, it's alright, it'll get the job done, but I wouldn't exactly write home about it. Since hardly anyone ever climbs, you're gonna be facing or pouncing a lot of planes that are lower altitudes than you. And not having a pulse Doppler mode on that radar when you're engaging targets at very low altitudes makes it really difficult for the MiG-21. And if you think, well, I'll just use the other rear aspect IR missiles, but why would you want to restrict yourself by only engaging a rear aspect? That means is that you generally don't want to be the first one making contact or getting right in the middle of everything, right at the center of the map. That's regardless of which missile you decide to use. Point being, if you already have to close that much distance to effectively use your missiles, because let's be honest, even the radar ones aren't really that good, you're still gonna have to close a lot of distance, and might as well have 6 R60s right up your pocket. The R60s are good on the MiG-21, but they still aren't the best either. You can kiss your missile goodbye as soon as anyone hits space one time and they pop a flare. But you can still get the occasional lucky kill by people spamming flares and not turning and keeping their afterburner full. So while I am very quick to dismiss the R60 as soon as a player gets popped, there are some instances where that R60 is like a pitbull and does not let go. Seekers can still go through some flares and still chase you, and that's something that a lot of people don't bank on either. Before I launch my R60s, I try to make sure that I'm at least under 2 kilometers from the target. I find 1.5 kilometers to be that one sweet spot, just in case they try and turn out of the way or flare. So in comparison to other planes and their missiles, like let's say like any F4 and a Sparrow, you have to get really close compared to them. Depending on the situation, but more times often than not, you're not going to want to be dogfighting in this thing. As soon as you see your missile go for a flare and you're not able to get your 23 mils on the target, it's just better to disengage and come back around when you're able to. You want to make sure that you're always in the most advantageous position possible because you need it. As much as I love an underdog, this thing can perform like that. You might be seeing the gameplay in the background and thinking, well, isn't that exactly what you're doing? And that's also another lesson. Do as I say and not as I do. But I mean, realistically, you're not always going to be the one deciding the tempo of battle. But if you're still dying then, hey man, don't worry, I still die in this thing too. But because this thing has such a clunky airframe and its light model isn't quite what it used to be, I like to keep this thing as light as possible. Mind your throttle and mind your fuel count. I generally run 17 minutes of fuel and I'll just go full afterburner until I'm in the middle, just a little bit past the middle of the map. That allows me to do is, with my altitude and my positioning, I'm more oftentimes than not being able to just turn into my enemies and get side aspect missile shots on anybody that's near me. So another mechanic of War Thunder that not a lot of people talk about is your crew points. Don't be afraid to level up your awareness stat or your keen vision stat. While it does take a long time for you to accrue those points and to level up your crew, it definitely does pay off a little bit at the end. While my crew in the video isn't aced out, I have had other planes with ace crews, and let me tell you, it does make a difference. Although slight, it does help. So it's okay if you don't have a maxed out crew, it's definitely not the end all be all. but you definitely want to get to the habit of having your situational awareness and playing off of your team, especially in the areas that this plane is weaker at, especially dogfighting. And having said earlier that you generally don't want to be the first plane making contact with the enemy, it makes perfect sense to play off of your team. Go for any plane that while you're at altitude sea diving for your friendlies, and maybe also pull off and try and boom back and get most of their altitude back. This plane excels in that. Because the MiG-21 is so fast, and if you're trying to keep it light and with your altitude, this makes the perfect recipe for you to be able to sneak in and get a kill, dip, and then come back around for at least one more. Also, just don't get greedy in this thing. And that's kind of a general rule for any aircraft and just any game in general, but just don't get greedy. It happens to me too, and I can't tell you how many situations I've thrown away because I thought I could just get an R60 off and it didn't work out. However, if you're really committed to a dogfight and it's just a 1v1 or you're able to isolate a target, you have enough energy for at least one turn. It's a delta wing. It'll bleed speed like no other. However, you do have at least one turn in you. But after that, I really wouldn't count on this thing being able to clutch. If you do find yourself still struggling with the missiles, don't worry, I also did struggle a lot with these at first. It is very tempting to just want to sling off and fire all 6 of these at the same time at whatever targets you see first, but I recommend you exercise caution. Prioritize those planes that aren't looking directly at you or that you're catching up to and they still aren't aware of you. If I see a target start to pre-flare, half the times I won't bother unless it's a Traken or an F5 or just planes I know that don't have too many countermeasures that I know I can probably get a shot off on still. To know your enemy is to defeat them. Not every situation is going to be one that you win, but you still want to give all your all, and it definitely can perform if you have that mindset already in place. If you made it this far to the video, let me know what you think. Do you like the MiG-21? Do you like facing it? What do you think when you first see it on the battlefield? I would think a lot of us would think this is an easy kill, and for sure I know I think that when I'm in a different plane. But thank you for watching, and if you hope to see more of me, like and subscribe. I'll hope to be uploading more, and enjoy the rest of the video. Thank you.